This is a production of Cornell University.
And we want to make sure that that data is available to to these breeders and research communities, also folks that are engaged in industry, developing new technologies like hempcrete. And we've heard some really cool applications for hemp material, fiber, different kind of fibers, geofabrics. It's incredible where this crop can go, and so we feel very privileged to be part of the community and to support these efforts where we can. My specific title is research geneticist. Currently, I think where we can really focus our efforts is, as Zach mentioned, these multi-state evaluation efforts. And so we have a couple great collaborators here, Stephen Belush, Ernie Siebert from Alabama and Oregon State, and also Larry Smart and Chris Smart from Cornell. Really appreciate and Shanu from Alabama A&M as well. Also many other great collaborators, Shelby Ellison here, David Suchoff, a great research community, and hopefully everyone's able to kind of reach out and chat with some of these researchers. So I think evaluations of this material across states, because some material might do very well in New York, but perform poorly in Oregon, say, or Alabama, and vice versa. There might be some material that looks horrible in New York, but looks great in Alabama for growers in that southeast region. So I think that characterization is so vitally important of this germplasm. It's coming, Zach's getting, accessions every day. Sometimes hundreds of accessions will come in a lot. And so it's a big task to do a thorough evaluation. We're trying as hard as we can to grow out these materials and evaluate for many different traits, including fiber quality, grain quality, and the one that's probably most pressing is secondary metabolites, looking at THC levels. And then as a geneticist, I'm curious which of these germplasm which of this germplasm has stable and low THC levels across these different states, so that we can use those varieties for backcrossing into this diverse germplasm, so that we can have regulatory compliant material that's available for distribution. And so I also want to highlight another study that we're doing with Chris Smart and Larry's group, and Nicole Gauthier and Bob Pierce down at the University of Kentucky, and that is looking at resistance to a bunch of really important pathogens. That includes powdery mildew, septoria, downy mildew, and fusarium head blight. And so we think that that's going to be really important data to get out to growers in the research and industry communities as well. If there are other traits that we haven't mentioned that you think would be really important, I know that there was an earlier question about looking at stem THC concentration. That I think we're open and willing to discuss looking at additional traits. This year we started a root study as well, because some folks mentioned that roots were very important, and looking at like root biomass, root morphology. And so your comments help inform where our research goes and what kind of data gets posted onto Grand Global. So we're very excited about this. Very excited to tell folks what we're up to. I don't think our trials are going to be part of today's activities, but if you'd like to see them at some point, reach out to us and we can take you on a tour of our research trials just a couple miles away from here. And I want to thank Larry and the Cornell team for hosting this event, and please reach out with questions at any time, and good seeing this group. All right, thank you.
nationally in fiber production for sustainable construction materials. There is a lot of interest in Chinese hemp coming in from China, which grows very well, grows very tall, flowers very late, so it's good for fiber production. But every Chinese cultivar or variety, I call them land races, that we have tested has tested hot. We know the genetics of THC production. We know why they test hot. Because the genes for THC production have not been bred out of those Chinese varieties. We have done that in our breeding program, and Luis is going to talk about those lines, as well as all the varieties that you see here that he is evaluating. I think, Luis, if you can think about how we can get people moving down to our next stop, which is down by the FarmDroid there. Then we get our blood flowing here. It's getting a little bit chilly. But Luis has about 40 minutes to describe all of this stuff here. Well, 30 minutes plus questions.
Thanks so much, Larry. First of all, I would like to pass on some samples for you guys to see. So those are the genetics, well, the seeds that we have currently in our germplasm collection. You can see different seed sizes and what happens when you extract the hemp hearts from it, and then you get the hearts and the hulls. You can also see pressed oil, and you will see this gunk at the bottom. It's because it was whole seed pressed oil. No, it wasn't just the heart. Sorry. So just pass it around so people can take a look at those. But yeah, so today I want to cover the small plot trial, which encompasses 12 fiber cultivars, as you can see on my right, and 18 dual-purpose cultivars. In total, we have 26 cultivars. Some of them are trialed in both dual and fiber to see which production system works best for them. So first of all, I started my talk last year with this question: who here is wearing or having any fiber-derived product? Thank you so much. Last year we got none. So I'm very happy that we have more people.
You. Every day.
My hemp heart. Hemp hat, sorry. 100% hemp fiber. Yeah. So I'm glad that people are, utilizing the industry as you should. So yeah, I'm very confident that most of you know what hemp fiber is, where it comes from, and everything. But just a quick reminder, so make sure that we're all on the same page. It comes from the cortex, which is like the bast, called bast, and then the inner woody part, also called the herd, is what is used for hempcrete, for pulp, for paper. It can be used for animal bedding, right? So make sure that we're all on the same page, right? So I don't want to tell you like how to grow fiber specifically, or like the anatomy or the physiology of hemp. I think some of you already know more or less what that is. But rather, I would like to tell you the importance of what we're doing right now. And with that, I think it would be best if I can start from the very beginning. In 1912, Lister Dewey was the first, or at least is claimed to be the first hemp breeder. He started working around Minnesota, Kentucky, and those cultivars were named based on like the origin of those germplasm. So there is Kymington, Kentucky, Minnesota, Washington. Chymington, China, or Chimpton, something like that. China, Washington. And there's Faramington, which is a Italian land race and a Washington originated population. So you can tell the assessment of hemp germplasm has happened long time ago, goes way back, and he already evaluated multiple germplasm for different origins. So you can tell that what we're doing is nothing new, but rather necessary. So later, in 1925, despite the prohibition that happened in the US, that didn't mean that hemp breeding stopped. It carried on in Germany. This researcher called Gustav Bredman, he worked on improving bast content, and it was very interesting reading this paper. It was in German, so I had to translate a little bit, so hopefully I'm conveying the right information. He was able to improve this bast content that I was talking about from 9% to 30%. So we're talking about 2.5 to 3-fold increase in bast content. At the same time, other researchers were able to find the first monoecious individuals in 1930s. So it was very interesting. So then Dr. Gustav Bredeman had a successor, and he, in his paper in 1952, suggested or indicated that this successor will use these first monoecious cultivars and combine them with these high quality cultivars that Dr. Bredeman developed. So you can see how the hemp breeding has been going on, and what you are seeing right now may have been originated from a long time ago, but from those researchers. Later, in 1946, Walter Hoffmann, another German researcher, identified what he called bright stems mutation, which is a yellow stem that you may see on that side. So eventually, the need of ease of decortication in the industry elicited the Dutch researchers to release 4 cultivars, among which there is this called Chameleon and Ivory, which are well-researched yellow stem cultivars. And there are papers from 2018, very recently, and from this year, that suggest the ease of decortication, the higher bast content compared to a green stem cultivar. So I think, as you can see, like, what we are doing is not new, but rather necessary, and is where we are right now, and is a guide of where we should go. So bringing it back to us as a summary, there was a first breeder in the US using some recurrent phenotypic selection. There were some researchers in Germany improving bast content, others finding first monoecious, others finding bright stems. So let's bring it to current modern time. Right now, the bast content that we see is about 25%, 35% bast content. However, this year I read a paper claiming from Lithuania, claiming a cultivar having 42.23% bast, which is ridiculous. So it's great, right? Like, hopefully it's true. I don't know, but you can see that, you know, these cultivars are all over the place. I just mentioned Lithuania, right? So we need to assess germplasm for different locations to see what performs best, and if it doesn't, what traits can we take advantage of so that it works here with other germplasm that's more adapted to here, right? So yeah. So for that reason, you have germplasm here that is dioecious, that is monoecious, that is yellow, that is thin stem, the stick stem, and then we have dual purpose here. So does any of you know the current or the average yield in the US for fiber or grain? Well, I didn't know that either, so I looked it up. So we just talk about Canada. I also eat hemp hearts every single day. Yeah, so in Canada it's about 1,000 kilograms per hectare. So bringing it back to the system you may understand, is 750, 190 pounds per acre in like average with dry lands and irrigated. I have 2 different reports. So for fiber, in a fiber production system alone, instead of dual, is 2.4 to 4.8 tons per acre, US tons per acre. And for dual, is 0.3 to 0.6 tons per acre. Why am I telling you all these numbers? Because you have handouts of our yield, our projected yield for these small plot trials, and what we can achieve if we extend this from a small plot trial to a larger scale. So I wanted you to have those numbers as a reference when you look into those handouts. And lastly, another thing I wanted to say is, well, hemp produces fiber, right? But there's another crop that produces fiber that is widely grown, right? A paper in 2020 assessed the comparison between hemp fiber and cotton. Hemp fiber, on average, produces 3 times more fiber per acre than, or per area actually, than cotton. It's more environmentally friendly, clearly, and it reduces costs in agricultural production, or cultural activities rather, of 77.7%. So the numbers are out there, and the potential is out there. You need to take advantage of it. And this is what we're doing right now. So here we have 12 fiber cultivars. You can see the names, I'm going to tell you that. And you also have the handouts, so you can freely walk around and look at the plants. If you don't like this rep, please go to the other reps. We have 4 reps in a randomized complete block design, and that each rep is a block, and all the cultivars are randomized within that block of those 4 blocks. So I spoke a lot, so let me just pause a little. Any questions so far? Yeah. Great question.
Repeat the question.
What are the seeding rates for the fiber and dual purpose production system? So it will vary because of germination rate, seed size. So I don't like cookie cutter numbers because you may not have specific target plant density that you need. So what I can tell you is the ideal plant density or the target plant density. For dual purpose, that will be 12 plants per square meter. And for fiber,
Per square foot.
per square foot, sorry. And for fiber, it will be, I think I wrote like 30 plants per square foot, if I'm not mistaken.
25.
25? Okay. So I think you should go by the target plant density and then just based on germination and seed size. Yep.
I'm curious what you did for weed control and how these plots were prepared. If you did mulch plow or just harrowing, did you do any cover crop testing, any regenerative farming? Chemicals, any manual cultivation? What is done in all the?
We didn't spray any herbicide at all.
Okay.
I don't think we had a cover crop here before. I don't remember.
I think this field was in corn last year.
Oh, that's right. I saw a lot of like corn roots. Yeah.
Watering? Did you water it?
It's rain fed. Yeah, there's no watering. I think just at the very beginning no.
No irrigation in this
Yeah,
field.
and then just regular mechanization around the edges, but
Around the edges, no in-row
no,
cultivation.
nothing, no kind of mechanization at all. So, which is a very good point that you bring up because based on the genetics, we have different leaf sizes, right? So that can create a canopy closure very early in the season, preventing any weed growth. So that's another trait that we're interested in. What I would like to say is like the seedling vigor, like how vigor is a plant very early in the season to reach that canopy closure, so then you don't have any competition with the weeds later on, unlike other cultivars.
Yeah. One follow-up, well, unrelated. Another question, I guess. Lignin. Have you been tracking or testing lignin content? I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, so at harvest, we harvest in 1 square meter, and then that square meter encompasses all the stems there, and then we will later wet that material, and after that we will mill that material and analyze the cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, and pectin content. Yeah.
Last question. Now, do you call the herd, the shifts, do you call that fiber? I don't refer to it as fiber.
That
Filler? What's a
I
good
think
word?
I heard chives.
Yeah, because it would say fiber grain, but the fiber is, there's more herd than.
Yeah, it's what is it, like 70% herd, I believe.
So really you're growing for herd.
But depends how you grow it. So if you're harvesting dual purpose, that will be mostly herd.
Yeah.
The idea here is before you reach flowering, that you will get mostly bast, which will be it will be the same proportion, but the proportion will be much less. You still have more herd.
Mm.
Yeah.
And to get those really high levels of bast fiber that you're talking about earlier, that's not going to be textile grade. It might be good for non-wovens, but I think for textile grade fibers, you have to harvest earlier, right? So it's not fully lignified, and then you might only see less than 10%.
Well,
There's no market for textile grade fibers, but this is the case.
I do think there's a market in North Carolina, right?
Yeah. I mean, all of our data.
What is David Suchoff?
There is.
There is, right? And the idea is to harvest like at flowering to maximize the bast. And I think as long as you get the long fibers, which are the primary bast, they are long enough for spinning. The longer you let it mature, it will be shorter. So then for spinning, that will be very complicated, right? So That's what we have to, and also the plant density is much higher here to maximize that. So we have the interplant competition, right, so that triggers more growth among plants. You have longer internodes, you have finer, many papers from Europe claim that the higher the plant density, the finer the fibers you get, the nutrition as well, although that's a little bit iffy because you have to be careful with nutrition. But yeah.
Luis, could you talk about your planting dates as to if you can have, well, maybe not here, but multiple crops in 1 year, those type of
Great question. Yes. So
tie
this.
that into the flowering time and latitude of it.
Yeah. So the question was if I could elaborate more on the planting date and yeah.
So the whole process of from seed to harvest.
Yeah, and the whole time frame from seeding to harvest. So
When this trial was run.
right. So in the handout you will see two planting dates. So this entire field was planted on May 18th. There's a second planting all the way down there. When we walk towards the end of this field, you will see 4 blocks. That's the second planting. That was for the fiber plot. That was on June 9th. And for a dual plot, that was on June 30th. And the reason why they were spaced out is because we are going down. So yeah, so the flowering time, if you see in the handouts, you have different flowering times. So, and I have different criterion for each fiber and right? So for fiber, I harvest it when the plant reaches 50% flowering. In that way, I maximize yield and I minimize my loss in quality of fiber. For dual, I harvest between 6 to 7 weeks after about 85% of the plants have flowering. So in that way, I minimize seed shattering, I maximize maturity, and well, that also depends on the bird pressure you have. Now, the planting day is a good question because in the industry's claim that a crop is X days and 100 days or something like that. So if you look at the handout, I can tell you the opposite. And that might as well be because of environmental cues, or yeah, in this case, more specifically for period, right? However, another thing that I want to mention is that in Europe, in 2008, there was a paper talking about growing degree days, how in other crops is commonly done. This paper was later evaluated again in 2012, validated, but after that, no one has touched that paper. And no one has touched those formulas that they came up with. And some of those cultivars that they use for that model are growing right now here. So what I'm doing by these 2 planting dates is to see the environmental effect on these cultivars planted very early and late, and to see how they fluctuate. Another thing that flowering time should tell you is the how homogeneous the crop is. So if you look at the handout, some plants will reach this will start flowering from 1% to 50% or from 1% to 100% at different rates depending on when they are planted. So that may also be explained by the growing degree days in this model. So I want to explore that, I want to look into that and which cultivars abide by that. And instead of using X amount of days, just based on, I don't know what they're basing on, but a growing degree days, a formula would be a better indicator to determine when to flower so you can schedule your equipment and all the processing and so forth and so on. However, I am very certain that not all cultivars will abide by that model because of heavy genetic effects. X59 is one of those. Will flower about 20-30 days. However, in the handout, you'll see that it's not cookie cutter. It fluctuates in date. So I worked really hard to put those data together for you to take advantage of those numbers and to see the distinction between this and to say, hey, actually your website says 100 and something, but maybe this is not so much in this area. Now everything changes the lower the latitude that you go to plant these cultivars. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned insecticide. You said that none used.
No. No. Yeah. David.
Luis, variety trials are a lot of fun because there's so much genetic diversity, and you probably know these fields better than anyone else. So which is your favorite variety and why?
So David is saying that I know this plot better than anybody, and that's right. Which one is my favorite cultivar or variety, and why? Probably Audi. But
Yeah, which one?
actually, good question. 231143 is our breeding line. If you look around, one thing that you will notice is the lodging. There is lodging going on. 231143 is the one that's standing very strong. Another particular trait of this breeding line is the seed size. You may have seen the seeds on the samples that I turned around, one that I gave you guys, and you can see the seeds are massive. In some cases, we have gotten seed size comparable to soybean. So I find that very appealing, and as an agronomist, like that's a very enticing agronomic trait that I want to pursue. So those will be and the late flowering trait as well. Flowers kind of late. So I think that breeding line has a potential for either a dual purpose or a fiber cultivar depending on when it's planted.
You mentioned cotton, so can we grow cotton?
I don't know.
No, so it's not even yet.
No.
Were all these varieties for this latitude, or did you grow some that were specific for other latitudes just to see how they would do?
I think the latter. Yeah. So the question was.
Maybe talk about our collaborations with other universities.
The question is if I decided to use or to test this cultivar based on their adaptability to this region, or I was just testing like overall all available germplasm. So I tested. We decided to test cultivars from different regions, probably northern than our southern of our latitude, from where I'm coming from, Europe. However, our breeding lines are being tested across the United States. So we have trials here, obviously. We have one in Ithaca. We have one in North Carolina that David is helping us phenotype. We have one in Kentucky, which is managed by Dr. Bob Pierce. We have one in Texas by Dr. Calvin Trussell, and one in Homestead, Florida, by my master advisor, Dr. Zachary. So we're seeing, and you can see in the handout actually, that our breeding lines they are performing, competitively in these other latitudes, and the different yields and phenotypic or agronomic traits that can be affected or not affected by the latitudes where they're growing.
And the main factor there is the photo period, right?
Yeah. That would be the main factor, but there are other factors like rainfall and planting dates and stuff like that.
I was delighted to hear you're from Ecuador.
Yeah.
And I've been to Ecuador many times. I started the process of educating the government there in 2013. And presented to the National Assembly and met with the Vice President. Really started the process of legalizing hemp in Ecuador. And then realized that, well, there's not really any varieties that will do well in the 12-12 life cycle for stalk and grain.
Not for now.
Not for now, but that's what I was leading to. Is this something? Have you tried? Have you brought genetics there? I've brought genetics to Ecuador and grown and seen them only get this tall and go to flower.
Yeah.
Whereas here they get 20 feet tall.
My lab mates are actually. Oh, the question is if we have tested or brought germplasm from latitudes close to the equator, and I think. I don't know if we can say this, but
Well, I'm asking the good question.
my lab mates are working on this. I'm not actively participating in this, but there is some work on
Good,
that.
good.
I haven't brought anything on this myself.
Trey.
I'm curious, you said that the larger seed size is attractive. Larger seed size, less seeds per pound, higher planting weight per acre to get the same stand. Production costs could go up. So I guess what's attractive from your perspective about the larger seed size?
Yeah, so the question is, why am I so attracted to the seed size, given that it will mean less seeds per pound and a higher higher cost for seeding and establishment. So I knew I'm gonna be asked that question. And my counter argument to that is the strong seedling vigor of this germplasm that will ensure canopy closure much earlier than others. And because of that, you may require less seed to get the same stand count compared to a small seeded cultivar that you require more seeds to reach canopy closure, that it will eventually lead to self-thinning, so you'll be losing money by the self-thinning individuals of those extra seeds that you're planting. So that is my hypothesis, and I'd like to test that next year to be more accurate, not just based on genotypes, but also the seed size per genotype, different sizes. Yep, good question.
Yeah, Louis, but it's also a great parent material when you breed it with others, so now you can see a complete variation in seed size, and you can actually select an ideal seed size during segregation down the line.
Yep.
Do you have data on that?
Oh, there you go.
So the question is if there is variation in seed size that actually I can take advantage of and develop cultivars for example, small seeded cultivars for fiber production and large seeded cultivars for dual product production. So you got ahead of myself. So I have a mapping population in which we are comparing two genotypes. These are cross, it's an F2 population in which there are a lot of trait class irrigating, and the difference between the parents is astounding. It's like 50 grams 1,000 seed weight compared to 5 gram 1,000 seed weight. So
Was Mendel right?
More or less. So there could be some major effect genes that can be used, and we can select for specific germplasm that are small seeded or large seeded, as long as Mendel was right. So the idea is so that can help us develop markers, and then we can put it into our toolkit to better germplasm. Also, 2011-43, I've been still working on it, and there are half-seed families in which there is irrigation for seed size. So the reason why I was saying earlier that from 2011-43 I can develop fiber and dual is because I've seen this irrigation, and I could do recurrent phenotypic selection to determine, these genotypes will be better for dual and these will be for fiber. Yep.
But the bottom line is that F1 and the F2 generation of that cross between large seeded and very small seeded is right in the middle. It's an additive trait. So Mendel was wrong. We would have expected, right, if it were dominant, either large or small, but it's clearly a quantitative additive trait that's going to take a lot of time to breed back if we want to introgress those traits and get large seed or small seed. It's going to take a lot of breeding to do that.
Yeah, kind of as a follow-up to Trey's question, how strong is the relationship between large seeds and high grain yield? I imagine you're playing this game where you have fewer larger seeds versus a greater number of smaller seeds. How does that come out in the wash in terms of overall yield per acre? Or is there just not a strong relationship?
And maybe as we're walking down, maybe people can sample particular varieties and look at seed size, because you only have about 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah. Could you elaborate on your question? I got confused with the question.
Yeah, no problem. So, how strong is the relationship between yield per acre of grain with seed size? Because I imagine there's a game where you can have a fewer number of large seeds or a greater number of smaller seeds, perhaps. So, is that a tight relationship? Have you observed?
Yeah. So in the handout, I put together the yield data. Maybe we should start walking. I put together a yield data. Oh yeah.
My name is Chris. I am the plant pathologist. Generally, people are not enthusiastic about the plant pathologist because, we deal with rotten plants. But we're here to tell you that we are also working to deal with producing a healthier stand more quickly. So in my lab, for hemp, we have people working on, Patrick is working on root rot issues, which he'll talk about. I have another student working on Septoria leaf spot, which is among the biggest leaf spot issues here in the state of New York, given the humidity and rain that we have. And then I have a student that's working on downy mildew. Again, that's a water mold that can be really problematic, especially if it gets established early in the season and we have a wet season. And then finally, together with the breeding program, we have a large group of folks working on powdery mildew, which can be an issue in the field, but is absolutely an issue in high tunnel and greenhouse grown crops. And in fact, we have identified a source of resistance, or technically lack of susceptibility, to powdery mildew that's now in the breeding program. And I am hopeful, as a plant pathologist, that the breeding program will breed all cultivars to be resistant to powdery mildew. I don't know how much influence I'll have. But today I would like to introduce my PhD student, Patrick McMullen, and he's going to talk to you about a seed treatment study that we're working on. He'll start with talking about the importance of it and then move into some of the results and where we're going with it in the future.
Thank you, Chris. So we've been talking a lot about above ground traits of hemp this morning. Louder. But you can't really have a healthy plant without a healthy root system to support that above ground growth. So we're interested in focusing on promoting early establishment, high densities by promoting good root growth. There's a number of soil-borne pathogens that can infect root systems and prevent that good root establishment. So these are among the water molds, Pythium. Many species of Pythium can cause damping off, where you have early seedling death. This pathogen will enter the root system and essentially decay the cortex of the roots, where the outer roots will just slop off and die, leading to total plant collapse. There's also fungal pathogens among Fusarium species and others that will cause root diseases in older, mature plants that will, the fungal hyphae can grow into the root system, clog the vasculature, and prevent water flow to those upper shoots of the plant, which are going to cause your plants to wilt and eventually die. So our goal here in this study was to see if we can promote the plant to root well early in its life cycle by applying a fungicide seed treatment. So here, this is all in the handout. So we'll be passing around some images of root diseases that you can look at what I was just discussing, where you can see the reddish-brown discoloration on the roots, small root growth, and then necrosis and wilting and plant collapse on the shoots of the plant. In the experiment here that we're standing in front of, we used 4 different fungicide seed treatments and a non-tree control. So there were 2 copper products, Americop and Ultim, and a phosphite and phosphate product, Prudent 44 and Neutral. And then we also included a conventional control of Apron and Maxim, a combination of 2 different fungicides. So these were applied to 2 different cultivars. We included Fiber 79 and Futura 83. All of the treatments are on both cultivars, and this is organized in a randomized complete block design. All of the treatments can be found on the, if you scan the QR code here, on the field map. If you scroll to the bottom, it will say seed treatments. And you can look at the...
And they're in the handout.
And yes, but there's the specific field map, so you could look at which treatments are here. So in this study, I collected stand count data at several time points throughout the growing season. And as you can see, it's not harvested yet, so we don't have that final data. But if we're looking at these numbers here, we can see that both Ultim and Prudent 44 and Neutral significantly increased the average number of seedlings per plot. So these were just a sample of a 1 meter quadrat section from each plot, where we counted the average number of seeds per treatment. All of the treatments did numerically improve the stand count density. So Maricop and the Apron and Maxim treatments here weren't significantly greater than the non-treated control, but we still did see a pretty large numeric increase there. And these continued at the next time point that we measured as well. So there is some optimism here that these seed treatments do improve our stand counts and plant establishment here. Soon I will be collecting harvest data, so I'll be measuring biomass and fiber quality and content to assess how these seed treatments correlate to yield. So we want to answer the question, if we see an increase in stand count, as we're seeing from these data on the sheet that you have now, does that correlate to yield at the end of the season? So are we still seeing that improvement in yield, or can improving the stand count allow us to reduce the seeding density that we're using? So using less seed, but maybe using a seed treatment to help us out there. So I think there's a lot of potential here. We're going to repeat this experiment next year as well, and we would like to include a biologic treatment. So the treatments that we used this year were just copper, phosphite, and conventional fungicide. 2 of those, Americop and Ultim, are organic products. The other 2 are not. None of them are labeled on hemp yet, but there is some of that works in the process for several of these products. But we would like to expand this work further next year to include biological products.
We'll for sure have a bacillus.
Yeah, we will have a bacillus and liquefacients product to test, just to give growers more options and different strategies for control. And I think I would like to take any questions you might have about seed treatments or diseases in general on hemp. Yes.
Is the seed treatment cost effective?
So that's it.
Like how expensive is it?
Yeah, so the question was, how expensive is the seed treatment, or is it cost effective? We don't have those data yet because we can't correlate it to yield. I don't know, do you have any idea offhand how much it would cost?
I don't.
No,
but
so
it's such a small volume that generally seed treatments tend to be more cost effective than treatments once plants are established.
and especially if the cost of hemp seed is so high that if we can reduce the number of seeds needed by applying a seed treatment, that could be a great way to achieve that.
Yeah, we will have those data probably by the end of next year after we have enough reps.
Yep. So more information on that to come.
What is the current range of seed cost?
What's the current seed cost, Larry?
Yeah, the question is, what is the price of seed? And we have a number of seed salespeople here who can answer that question to you directly. So Sarah Mitchell of King's Agri-Seed is here. Corby Middeth of Canopy US is here. There's Corby. And I would say our goal as a plant breeder, and we can talk to Trey. Trey asked a good question to Luis, is probably $3 a pound. And again, then you have to think about your seeding rate. You're seeding for grain production at 25 pounds per acre, but for fiber, we're seeding some at 100 pounds per acre. So those are important economic questions we need to work out with our agronomists. Let me just follow up Patrick's talk by saying here that in many of these small plot trials, and we've done these with collaborators, academic collaborators across the country, Ernie is a good example, we rarely see greater than 50% seed establishment. So we're seeding, at a live seed rate based on germination tests, and then coming out and doing stand counts, and we rarely see more than 50% of those live seeds turning into an established seedling. A good portion of that is probably due to soil-borne pathogens, so the work that Patrick's doing, is critical to increase that rate of stand establishment, because 50% of this seed that you're growing doesn't turn into that you're planting doesn't turn into a plant, right? So then you have to plant twice as many seed to get the stand that you want, and that's not economical either. So, you know, I would have said in the industry that, again, 4 years ago, one of our biggest problems was getting high quality seed at high germination rate, because it was all coming in from Europe, you know, and we were always the last thought, right? But now that we have folks like Corbett bringing in hemp varieties from France in a timely manner and storing it properly, and now we have domestic seed production from companies like International Hemp, and good Canadian seed from Uniseeds and Verve, and New West Genetics, all domestically produced. I think we now have overcome that barrier in terms of the quality of seed. So that when you buy a seed lot and expect it to be 90% germination rate, you can get that now, whereas you couldn't get that 4 years ago. So now we need to move on to these other problems like, you know, seed treatments and getting herbicides approved. And that's our next topic. And I'd like to introduce Vipan Kumar, who is our new field crop weed scientist at Cornell, to talk about how we finally have an herbicide product labeled and registered for hemp that we can use. And unfortunately, our weed scientist here at Agritech, Lynn Sosnowski, could not join us. She's at a conference in North Carolina. But Vipan is going to quickly present some encouraging results from Lynn's group, right?
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing so far?
Great.
Good, good. Well, as Larry mentioned, I'm a new to Cornell. I'm a new weed scientist with the field crops. I have a counterpart here, Dr. Lynn Sosnowski, who has been actively leading some of weed management program in hemp. A little bit about my background. Before joining Cornell, I was with Kansas State for more than 5 years, and I was working in Western Kansas in no-till dryland agriculture, mainly working with crops like sorghum, wheat, dryland corn, a little bit soybean, as well as the sunflower, and a lot of fallow ground. As you know, in high plains, the moisture is limited and a fallow-based cropping system is predominant. As you know, no-till dryland, you're not able to do a tillage, so you're relying on herbicides for weed control. And repeated use of herbicides over the decades has created a problem like herbicide-resistant weeds. So my role was there to come up with the strategies to tackle those herbicide-resistant weeds. So jumping in at Cornell, I'm going to go and do kind of little same things in terms of developing weed management programs in field crops. So part of my responsibilities here is to come up with sustainable weed control strategies in field crops, including corn, soybean, alfalfa, as well as small grains. So as I said, I'm 6 months old in Cornell and not aware about this new crop, hemp. But Lynn kind of gave me quite an overview of what's going on in terms of weed control. And you guys might have a handout here, what has been going on in terms of weed control research in Cornell Agritech here in Geneva. Just a few very foundational points I like to hammer as I do with other crops is, as you know, hemp compared to other crops is relatively a new crop, so we don't have many options. When I say options, I talk about herbicide options. We don't have many herbicide options to go with for weed control. But fortunately, work from Dr. Lynn Sosnowski and other colleagues from USDA, we were able to have a supplemental label with one of the herbicide in the New York this year. And that herbicide is a Sonalan from Govan Company. If you know or most of you know probably, a group 3 or root growth inhibitors. This herbicide belongs to group 3, herbicide site of actions. So ethyl fluoralin is the active, and it is the label for both type of hemp, and the rate is 1.5 to 3 pints per acre, and you can select the rate based on your soil type as well as other conditions. So one important thing about the Sonalan is a pre-plant applied herbicide. So you probably have to incorporate this herbicide when you're applying that, and that can be done with irrigations or rainfall, or if there's no rainfall or no irrigation available, you probably have to do that incorporation mechanically. So incorporation is very, very important, and this group is basically a root growth inhibitors, as I said, target majority of the grass species, grass species including barnyard or crabgrass, but also has activity on broadleaves like pigweeds. So that's good news in the hemp industry, that we have a herbicide which you can use for weed control. And in general, weed control, why weed control is important in hemp, as you know, just like other crops, if you allow weeds to grow, especially in early season, like within 1 to 4 weeks after planting or transplanting, you're going to see the impact on the yield as well as the quality in the hemp. So early season competition is really, really critical, and I've been hearing from Larry and others, very good work in terms of breeding lines, developing traits for good agronomic traits. I would also probably seek collaborations and work with Larry and others in the futures to see if we have some potential and opportunities to select some lines that has a competitive advantage compared to the weeds, because we need those lines, we need those cultivars having a competitive advantage than weeds. So other than that, that handout also covers a lot of cultural practices, very understandable things which we can do to avoid weeds, basically preventive measures. Don't grow hemp in fields where there is a lot of weed seed bank, basically selective weed-free field. Proper timing, planting time. I see there's been 3 timings for some of these varieties has been planted. I think that is a good approach to optimize that proper timing, because some of these competitive weeds are also coming at that time, and if you have a proper timing, you can avail the opportunity to control those weeds before you plant your crop. Let those weeds come, and then you control with some sort of burn down or some other methods of weed control, and then plant. So site selections, planting time, seeding rate, a lot of interest in seeding rates and why large seed and versus small seed. I guess Larry made a good point. Having a good vigor, uniform germination, uniform emergence is really critical when we are dealing with early season weed competition, so that you have a good canopy of the crop that can suppress the weeds early in the season. So again, cultural practices, control weeds in rotational crops. One of the major hurdle in terms of hemp, we don't know much about the crop tolerance or crop plant-back restrictions from most of the chemicals we use in our rotational crops, things like in corn and soybeans. So that is a big hurdle to really bring more herbicide options into the crop or use herbicide in rotational crops. So I would say select integrated approach, integrated weed management approach, rely on other options like cultural practices as well as mechanical practices. You can rely on some sort of inter-row cultivation, inter-row mowing, if you have planted those hemp in standard rows, along with herbicide, maybe in rotational crops once in a while, if you can. So those are kind of the major points I had. Any question you guys have for me? Yes.
Is there going to be different herbicides you can use based on different market classes? So say you could use one for fiber and grain production, but not one for cannabinoid production?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I wish. The question is if there are going to be herbicide options available for different classes, for example, for fiber or for grain or for other types. I guess I wish, and everybody wish, that that is the case. But in case of herbicides, labeling and registrations, there's not lot of interest from the industry standpoint because of the smaller industry, the hemp industry, I'm saying, as well as the crop tolerance and the crop plant-back restrictions. Of course, there has been some work with IR4 has been going on, looking at other options, other tools, herbicide tools. And Lynn mentioned that there's quite a good results with the Kizalofop class 1 herbicides for grass control. But again, where that stands in terms of registrations still in the future. Similarly, she has been looking to look at some of the group 15s, S-metolachlor, acetochlor type materials in conjunction with Sonalan, so that you can extend the residual activity for season-long weed control. But again, those are non-label herbicides in the hemp, and I guess there's more work needs to be done. Thank you. Any other question? Yes. Question is if I'm doing any work with the interplanting. I'm not. As I said, I'm just developing my program, and my major role is in field crops. And when I was thinking of hemp, especially for grain type, I think that falls probably under field crops. And yeah, I have not done any work. Maybe Larry has any information on that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was just talking with Sarah Mitchell, and she's working on a system in Pennsylvania of planting a nurse crop with hemp. And then I think you also want to talk to Professor Ginny Moore in plant breeding at Cornell, who is breeding cover crops, and I think has been looking at planting hemp into cover crops as well. So that's a great question. Just to touch on your question, if you are growing for CBD or high THC cannabis, that tissue will be tested, and those tests often include a test for pesticide residue. So there may well be a different herbicide regime that you're going to use for CBD, hemp, or cannabis versus grain and fiber based on that tissue residue testing. Yeah.
Have you done any soil testing before the crop was planted and after to see was it some chemicals were detrimental to the soil and that type of stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question is about doing pre-planting soil testing, in particular to look for any elements in the soil or pesticide residues perhaps that might get into your crop. That I would highly recommend doing that for CBD hemp, again because of the post-harvest testing regimes. Although we do not have a good understanding, for example, of the levels of cadmium in the soil, that may lead to high levels of cadmium in the floral tissue. So it's a great question about doing those tests, but by my understanding, we don't have good predictive ability to say how the results of those tests will end up in residues in your harvested crop, for example. What we do know is that hemp can be very tolerant of heavy metals.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it can suck up heavy metals out of the soil. What happens to the biomass if we want to use it for construction, for example?
Yeah.
Are we storing those heavy metals inside the walls of the house?
Yeah. So the question again is, if you test and observe high levels of cadmium in the soil, will that cadmium end up in the stems and then end up in your hempcrete? And I'm focusing on cadmium because that is probably the main element that hemp is good at taking up heavy metal. There are a lot of heavy metals, and hemp is not going to take up all of those heavy metals, but cadmium is one in particular. So we made a little demonstration of Sonalan here. We planted this little trial on August 3rd, and between there are two replicate strips. The blue was not treated with Sonalan. The yellow strips were treated with 2 pints per acre of Sonalan. Lynn surveyed those plots, I think, 3 weeks after planting, and there was no significant difference in the weed competition. And that's mainly because the main weed that we had coming up was field pennycress, and Sonalan specifically says on the label that it does not control field pennycress. So that again highlights that we need a range of methods, as Vipan said, an integrated weed management approach, and it all starts with keeping weeds out of your fields for the start. So thanks very much.
Larry, one question, sorry.
Bernie.
You mentioned diseases and weeds and everything. Have you guys experienced any problem with insects?
Okay. So the question is, do we have any insect pests? And again, we have been working with, started working with Elson Shields, who was our field crops entomologist, and more recently have been working with Marion Zufli in integrated pest management, who have been doing insect surveys for a few years now. And to be honest, we do not have any insect pests that are causing economic damage in New York after several years of surveys.
Have you seen aphids? The bond aphid?
Oh, we see aphid. We see cannabis aphid in the field, but
it doesn't really.
Our conclusion at this point is that it is not causing economic damage.
These are tilled fields.
All of these fields have been tilled. Yeah, we have not done much work on no-till. Sarah?
How much emphasis are you looking at for the grain market? Because not everybody wants to grow a 15-foot crop, and it seems to me that a shorter grain variety would be more, I guess, appropriate for farmers who aren't yet willing to spend tens of thousands on new equipment. And that, I guess the reason for that question is about insects in the grain. So how much emphasis are you looking at for grain and all associated diseases and insects?
Okay. So Sarah is asking about our emphasis in terms of market class of hemp. So again, I would classify that we have varieties that are best suited as a grain-only, dedicated grain crop that are easy to harvest with conventional combines. We're today promoting, we're promoting dual-purpose crops, partly because we want to demonstrate that double-cut combine, grain and fiber. And also because I think the market growth potential right now is in the herd and bast areas. As we all know, Manitoba Harvest grows a lot of grain in Canada, and they can harvest that with those whatever 60-foot wide combines out there. Whoa. Whatever they are. I'm going to defer your question till the afternoon when we're talking about the double cut, because we are going to see some strip trials out there that did not reach the height that we need for the double cut. So I definitely think there is a need and a market for dedicated grain-only varieties. Once we get grain approved as an animal feed, that's going to open up that market. And we want farmers to put those crops in rotation with their other small cereal grains that they can harvest with their combine. Yeah. Okay. We need to move on.
As Larry said, we've been certified organic now. I think we started transition in 1992. I was 3. I don't really remember that. So my whole life we've been organic. My viewpoint is not what can we get in a jug to get, what can we get registered so we can handle the weeds. It's how do we manage the weeds mechanically. That's my whole view on this. We're farming about 1,900 acres of organic ground. We process seed, so, and we do a lot of unusual things. So when hemp licensing started in 2018, we jumped right on and tried to grow hemp, and it was a horrible disaster. Because we were focused on grain production, and we were running with a relatively low population, and then we had some crusting issues, and we didn't have an adequate population to manage the weeds, and we didn't harvest anything 2 years in a row, and we gave up the license because it just wasn't really working. And Larry tried to pull me back into hemp production a couple of times since then, and I was not real interested until this year when I ran into this machine when I was in Germany visiting my wife's family. It was a curiosity, so I went to visit the company, and they told me that they have 4 machines running in Saskatchewan on hemp on an 8.6 by 8.6 spacing, dropping 2 seeds at each point. They've dramatically reduced their seeding rate, and they've increased yields, and they have some side-by-side pictures. Then they realized they shouldn't have told me so much and wouldn't tell me who was doing this. But that got me interested in trying this. We brought it in to grow red beets, and we were going to grow adzuki beans, but we decided to try some hemp as well, working with a licensed grower. We were focused on seed production, so we went with a 15-inch row spacing with a 9-inch in-row spacing. We were dropping 2 to 3 seeds at each seeding point so that the seeds were able to help each other out. It's not a uniform spacing, but hill drop seeding was a common practice 100 years ago before some of our modern technology came along. So we had, by my calculations, about 120,000 seeds per acre, maybe 140,000 seeds per acre. And where the machine did what it was supposed to, we have a perfectly clean field. I say where it did what it was supposed to because there's a huge learning curve with this technology. This is an autonomous robot. It did all of the planting. It recorded the GPS location of every seed to the nearest half centimeter. That's why it has 2 GPS receivers on top. We had to install our own base station. One of our landlords actually has worked for the Navy, and he said, "How are you getting it that accurate?" And I kind of said, I don't know. He was aware that that accuracy was possible, but didn't realize that it was open to civilians. So the principle of the machine is to drop every seed, know precisely where it is, and then come back in later, even pre-emergence, and cultivate between those seeds with a knife on an arm that is able to travel back and forth between the seeding points. It can do that on as little as 100 millimeters, so 4 inches of space between seeds. So I think there is space to increase seeding rate, decrease the space between seeds with this technology. I sent Larry a few pictures. I think they went up of nearly clean under canopy views. Also some videos of it working between plants. And because I don't know what your all interests might be, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Cost?
Right around 100,000 US. There is not currently an importer in the United States. This came in through Canada. They've been putting a lot of pressure on me to be an importer. Don't have time. So service is all coming out of Canada, but I think we're going to see that changing probably within the next 12 months.
Economics, return on investment?
At this point, I believe this is very much a proof of concept thing, so we're not as focused on that. I think that the return on investment has to do with high value crops. So if this can be used on a farm that is growing vegetables, that is growing also hemp, maybe some other fiber crops like flax, where your seeding period is stretched throughout the season and your cultivation period is stretched throughout the season, the return is going to be a lot better. It can theoretically handle 15 acres per day. It does run 24 hours a day. So just spreading out the period when it needs to be used is going to really increase the acres that you can cover in a year and decrease the cost per acre. The operating cost per acre is practically zero. It's really just the wearing elements because all of the energy comes from the solar panels.
Thank you.
24 hours, but solar panels. So what kind of storage of the energy that you have to run if you're going to let it plant after midnight?
It has a set of lithium-ion batteries on board. The solar panels produce up to 1,600 watts of power, and the maximum power requirement of the machine is 1,100. So it will charge through the day. There is a second set of batteries that can be put on if needed. Some of the users in Europe that I talked to are actually mounting like a little 600 watt inverter type generator on it and going out and turning it on at 10 o'clock at night to charge the battery while it continues working and shut it off when the sun comes up in the morning.
It's self-propelled.
It is self-propelled.
So the tractor's not needed for...
No, it is fully autonomous. Once you map the points in the field and any obstacles, it develops a plan of where it's going to drive and then executes the plan.
How's the deal with stones in the soil?
It doesn't particularly like stones. Soil preparation is extremely important.
It's stony here.
It is stony here. I would say that we are stonier down 10 miles south of here in Penn Yan. The glaciers had a lot of fun on our farm. I've been picking stones since I was big enough to pick them up, and I think my grandkids
Do you think
probably
they grow?
will be.
I think they grow.
I think that the soil's ending up in the lake. Soil preparation is a huge deal. This is very much focused at a horticultural model where you are paying much more attention to the soil than in broadacre production.
But that's a great point, Jack, that mechanical cultivation is very, very challenging on stony soils. And we have a lot of those in New York.
One of a kind, competition, anything else like this?
There are some other companies in Europe. There's, I think, a lot more of a grant funding program in the EU for autonomy because labor costs are higher. There's another company from Denmark called Robati. Kongskild was working in this for a while, but I believe when they were bought by Case New Holland, that kind of went in a different direction. There is a company called Nio in France that is working on this, and there is a Raven in Canada is working on a much larger scale version of this.
So it's happening.
It's impressive. Kudos for trying it.
You mentioned a steep learning curve. What sort of obstacles did you have to go through?
We prepared the ground like we would for our normal cultivation equipment and planting equipment, and it wasn't happy. It didn't like the amount of residue that was on top. It didn't like how loose the soil was, and the first crop that we planted with it, I had, I think, 300 text messages that something went wrong in the course of a day and a half.
How does it cover the seed? It goes this way.
It's currently set up mostly in weeding configuration. This row unit is set up for planting. There is one item missing because I forgot to bring it up from the farm, which is a closing shoe that goes on the back behind the primary press wheel before the secondary press wheel.
But it moves in this direction?
Correct.
Yeah. That's impressive.
Other questions?
Yeah.
What about in-row cultivation? Did you mention that?
Yes, there is a servo motor and it's on now, so it's not being cooperative. It doesn't like to move. But that servo motor moves an arm in and out. That arm carries a knife and is able to cultivate between seeding points that it has mapped during the seeding process.
Yeah. Hopefully the video is up on our website. You can see it going around the plants.
That'll be one of the most popular ones.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter.
Well done.
Thanks, Dr. Smart. We really appreciate Cornell and Dr. Smart working with us and giving us the opportunity to build this machine. This is the first mobile decorticator that's been built and functional in the U.S. We built the smaller one that was in Russia in 2018 that's still running, but it's a hand-fed single-stalk machine. but we've been making machinery since 2016, 2017. Believe it or not, we started on decortication back then when it was not a thing and nobody was interested in it. And at the time we thought we would make decorticators, which a decorticator is just this second piece. It's kind of in pieces right here. This is the decorticator. It's a roller breaker style machine, believe it or not, based on the 1905 Slickton model that got hemp banned in the first place. And we figured if it worked then, it would work now. And being a good German, he put a bunch of stuff in his patent that didn't work, and we spent a couple of years figuring that out. But we've got a technique that if you've got a crop that is grown with intent for fiber and grown on 3/8 of an inch, maybe 1/2 inch diameter stalks, does a very good job of separating if the crop's been retted and properly put up, which we're learning more about that all the time. We also farm hemp in Colorado, in 2014, 2015 when CBD started. A bunch of people got into it and a bunch of people got burned. So it's a little difficult for us to get contract labor or contract farming done in Colorado. So we actually just rent ground and farm it ourselves, and then we know what we're going to get. Dr. Smart mentioned Global Fiber. I do most of the R&D for Global Fiber and formation, but we've come out with a structural load-bearing hemp block that is not hempcrete, it's actual structural, in a cinder block configuration construction masonry unit. It'll hold 2,500 pounds per cubic foot. Normal cinder blocks are 1,500. And we've got 3 or 4 more products that as we keep working on them that you'll get to see them. And it all starts with this. It is an evolution in trying to figure out where can we take the 25,000 uses for it, where can we make $1 at it, because we have to pay for all this stuff. And we've come up with some pretty innovative value-add agricultural products that we can do with hemp. You mentioned dehulling. That's a great thing. Wish more people would eat it. We'd have a lot more dehullers around. This cinder block deal that we came up with changes the paradigm for agriculture, because this is not just hundreds of acres, it's tens of thousands of acres to supply this block. There are 522 billion cinder blocks made in the U.S. every single year. If we took 0.1% of that market, we would need 690,000 acres of hemp growth, which that's a difference. I mean, that makes a difference. In our area, water is a very big thing, conservation of water. We can grow a hemp crop on 7 to 8 inches of water, where potatoes between 26 and 28 inches of water. Alfalfa is 28 to 32. This year is really hot. They went even more. So it's a great technique for conserving water and all the other soil health benefits that hemp does for it, compaction, organic matter, etc. But that's why we keep pushing for ag to adopt more hemp acres. It's not easy. If you want to be in hemp, it's dirty, dusty, nasty, frustrating work sometimes, but it's the right thing to do. So we think that's good work, and that's why we keep investing our money in it. So this machine starts with a bale in feed. You would think that you can just unwind hemp on a hay bale machine, but you can't. Turns out we've tried a bunch of them. It doesn't work very well because a hemp crop, and any other crop really, doesn't always grow perfectly consistent. We don't have hundreds of years of breeding, and when you drive down the field and you see a corn field, all the ears are pretty much at the same height. They're almost all the same stature. Hemp doesn't grow like that. We have hemp fields that are 4 feet tall, and then you go 20 feet and it's 10 feet tall, 12 feet tall. So we had to innovate something that could handle that and meter the flow of the material downstream into the machine. So we came up with this machine, and what it is it's unrolling the bale kind of the opposite direction of as it was wound up, and then we're shearing off a certain thickness. Right now it's set for 1.25 inch mat. We can go up to 2 or 3 inches. We can go down a little bit, but we've found 1.25 inches is roughly where it needs to be so that the machine can more efficiently work. It's a little counter. The thinner the mat you feed to this machine, the faster you can run, because the decorticator can do more work on a thinner mat than it can a thicker. You'd think that would be opposite, but it's not. This machine also tips up on the incline if you need more pressure against the shearing device, but that's that piece of machine. In our facility-based ones, we put dust hoods over the top to collect the dust because our bales sit outside. We live in the desert, sand gets blown into them, and it just creates dust. So we have dust collection, and at altitude, dust collections are a real pain. We live at 8,000 feet, so it's kind of a nuisance, 7,700 feet. The main machine, Casey, hop up there, open those doors so they can see the gearing on it. It looks simple, but that second section right here that he's opening the doors on, that's 12,000 pounds of steel. That's about what it takes to break this crop apart. The more humid it is, the more work it takes. So we engineer those gears so that we can let those springs compress. The springs are putting pressure on the stalk, and we're working it gradually as we go. You can't just start decorticating. You have to break it up, get it softer, and then those rollers get faster as it goes through the machine. So not only do we kind of break it apart, but we're brushing the material off of the hurd off of the fiber. And that's what makes that work. You can push a button, the top half of that machine opens up, because hemp made really good rope, right? You hear that about the sailing ships and all that? It still makes really good rope. And if there's a round spot that hemp can wrap on it, we'll find it. When we start this thing up, we're sitting at about a 3-degree angle away from us, and it's making the fiber run towards the right-hand side of the machine. So that's it's kind of a pain, but I bought a jack a minute ago and lifted it up. We'll see what it does. So that's what the decorticator looks like. And then we always had, herd gets entangled in the fiber. This machine, a normal roller breaker can only take straight stalks. But the way we feed it and the way we've innovated this machine, we can take round baled, unoriented stalks, and it actually turns the stalks as they go through the machine to brush the herd off. But there's always a little bit of entanglement between the herd and the fiber. So the next piece, we call it a shaker table. Pretty creative name, but that's all we got. And it looks like it's shaking up and down, but it's actually the ellipse. It throws the material up in the air, material starts to come down, then it impacts the material again, knocks a little bit more of the herd out. It's still not perfect. So that next piece of machinery is a herd cleaner. It's an old piece of machinery. We upcycle them. We try to be environmentally friendly. We change a little bit of the guts on the inside of it. That separates what fiber is left on the herd as best it can away from the herd, sends the herd down to the last piece of machinery. The fiber that comes out of here goes out to we call it short fiber side. It's just short fiber. But the goal of the overall machine, because we want to make industrial textiles, meaning not clothes kind of stuff, but clothing too, we want as long a fiber as we can possibly get. When you clean and refine hemp fiber down to where you can get it to be spun, you have to start with a really long fiber. The fibers in these bags are bundles. They're not individual fibers by far. An individual hemp fiber is about 75, 80 millimeters long, and I forget the microns. It's human hair thickness. It's pretty tiny. But to get to that, you have to start with really long fibers. We can always cut something down, natural fiber, right? We can't make it any longer. So this technique is geared towards long line fiber, ultimately so that we can make very strong cordage. I came out of plastic, so I call them tape still, but they call them yarn. So you want to know the yarn count of your fiber, right? So when we break this down, we've got, if this was a full system, there'd be another semi-trailer sitting here that would clean and refine the fiber. And we're learning more and more about that all the time. We've developed some techniques where we think, well, we know we can open fiber up to the point where it can be spun without cards, chain guilds, or combs, which is really neat. Nobody's ever done that in the world. So, and that's another one of our R&D projects. We're not done with it. We self-fund all this stuff, so it takes us way longer than it should to innovate some things sometimes. But so we call this first milled fiber. Coming out of the machine on the bottom is the first milled herd. Then we clean the short fiber off of the herd. When the herd comes out of this large gray machine here, it goes into the one that's on the nose of the trailer. That's going to separate it into small, medium, and large parts. Small is like floor dry, kitty litter, things like that. The medium size, the way it's set right now, is builder grade herd or animal bedding. It's a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Oversized product, the way we've got set right now is 1 inch to 1.5 inches, just the way we're transporting it. We, because it's on a trailer and we didn't have a lot of room, we usually use conveyors to move the herd, but we had to innovate something different, so we're moving it with air. We don't move the fiber with air, especially when it's long, because air turns in a vortex in a tube when you're conveying things. long fiber turns into a giant rope, and then it becomes very hard to machine after that. So we still use conveyors until we've broken it down to 6-8 inch pieces. Just depends on what you're running. We do see wide varieties in genetics, harvesting techniques, retting techniques, all impact decortication. So you can set yourself up for success by controlling your farming practice, your harvest practice. When it comes to that structural load-bearing broth, we're trying to go from seed all the way to the finished product to control the spec, because that product will be stamped by an engineer that's doing the building. This block, the engineers at University of Nebraska with that load rating say we can go 4 stories high, and it's a true structural deal. You still need hempcrete. Hempcrete is an insulated product. It is not structural. Hempcrete is 21 pounds per cubic foot load bearing. Styrofoam, there's nothing there. So you still need that for insulation. So the whole plant you can still use for building material. It's just fascinating to me what all we can do with this product. I don't know what else you want to know about it, but that's kind of the machine. I'm really excited to have this thing running in here. It's a pretty unique deal. We ran it at our shop and we're really happy with it, and trucked it 1,900 miles over here. One thing I do know is the U.S. does not build very good roads in the mid part of the country. So we spent 3 days tightening things that I never thought we would tighten. But we did. So if something's banging around, that's why, because Ohio and Indiana have really crappy roads. So New York roads, I told Dr. Smart, one thing I thought I would never do is drive my semi east of the Mississippi. And I was really happy with the roads here, and he said, yeah, because we tax everybody. But it does work. You have great roads here, so I was happy to see that. So, but I'm sure we got questions in a group of this side. Just feel free to ask them. I'll do my best. It runs standard cinder block size, 8x8 by 16 hollow. We've run 6x6x1 pavers. We've run 3x3x8 bricks. It is formulated and engineered to run on existing precast manufacturing lines. That's how it's formulated.
Are you using a biorevolver, or?
I can't tell you that. We've got 3 years of time and money into that. And we figured out the chemistry of it. And it uses no Portland cement, no sand, no aggregate. Think of the hemp as kind of replacing the rock aggregate. And then some wet chemistry that we use to bind it. You know, we think it can be done like that. She asked if it could be molded or 3D printed. It flows. So yeah, if you can pump it, it can be moved. It's amazing. It's fairly viscous, if you will, when it comes out of the volumetric mixers. But if you vibrate it, it flows like it's wet still, like water. I still haven't figured that out, neither of the structural engineer guys. But it flows just like a normal precast zero slump cement. Yeah. Well, we sell the herd and the wet chemistry part of it. The goal is to license. She asked me if it's available. The goal is to license block manufacturers to work with architects and builders in regions, and then set up facilities like this to supply those regions. You know, if it's Omaha, Nebraska, or out here in Cornell, I'm sure there's a precast company, and you've got farmers that want to grow hemp. You set up a facility, and you start feeding herd into that manufacturing plant. Yep. Any more?
Are you supplying material to hemp potential?
Some of the short fiber, he asked if we send material to Hemptexture. The short fiber that comes off the back is what Hemptexture buys. They want short, small fibers for their cellulose bat insulation products. Yes, ma'am.
Do you take any fire preventative measures for machines like this?
Believe it or not, hemp is. The question was fire preventative measures. You don't cut on this machine. You don't weld or grind on it. Believe it or not, hemp dust is not explosive. We've sent it off and had it tested. We did that here too, with the order for Cornell. But it will smolder for about an hour or so if it's a spark, and then we've never had a fire, knock on wood, in the 6 years we've been running decorticators in our facilities. We're careful to clean heaters, we clean light fixtures, we have fire extinguishers laying around, but knock on wood, we've never had it catch on fire. We did have a little pile sitting out in the parking lot after a rainstorm one day, and it got hot after that. And I don't know if somebody was cutting out there, but it caught on fire. But we've been very fortunate not to have it. hemp does burn, and when it does, it burns really neat, but it takes a long time and energy to get it going. So that's a great question. People, it will burn. When it burns, it's hot.
Let me follow up that question. Part of the reason why this machinery is mounted on a trailer is because the Cornell facilities and environmental health and safety folks reviewed this entire project, came up with specs for the building that we would need to contain it to achieve Cornell standards, and one of our engineers, Scott DeHollander, is here, who can attest to all this, and Amy Fox, our EH&S person, is here as well. That would have been a more than $2 million facility to construct new with all of the proper fire and explosion hazard equipment. So Corbett is works in a different regulatory environment than we do. I'll just say that. But that is, we are only allowed to operate this machine outdoors. That's why it's on a trailer. So we are building a barn that will protect it from the elements, and then we will have a little trolley that will pull it out of the building for operation. Of course, the other reason to have it on a trailer is to be able to move it around the state. And we want to bring it to Henry Gage in Ulster County. We want to bring it to, there's Henry. We want to bring it to Henry's farm and show how it works. We want to bring it to the North Country. We want to bring it to Western New York, and we will do that. Let me just say that hopefully within the month, I will be posting an advertisement for a research support specialist to manage this machine, to operate it, and hopefully with a CDL truck driver's license, so that person can drive it around the state. So if you know of someone, an engineer with farming experience as well, to operate this machine, have them look out for that job ad when it gets posted.
A couple other questions here.
Good question. What is the weight of the bale, and what's the time and what's the tonnage per day going through the system?
Sure. He's asking, is it still on? It's still on?
Yes.
No. There you go. He was asking what is the weight of this bale and the throughput on the machine. We bale our hemp in 5-foot round bales, and they're 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 pounds roughly. If you make them too loose, they don't like to run very well. If you make them 2,000 pounds, if there's any flour left on them, they stick together and they're really hard to unwind. So throughput-wise, configured like this, if you're just running herd, the problem here is how do you take away the fiber fast enough? It'll run, at least a ton an hour. We've got some automatic machines to pull the fiber away. We've hit 1.5 tons an hour on this machine. This will be slightly slower just because it doesn't have some of the extra automation parts on it. There's another question.
I want to ask you about the dust.
Yes.
How much dust do you get from a bale like that?
We ran. He's asking me how much dust. We ran one of Cornell's bales last night. We live in a desert, so this bale's got sand in it. The bale we ran last night didn't have a whole lot of dust in it. A bunch of rocks in it, but it didn't have a lot of dust. So it varies by how it was harvested, where you store. We store all this stuff outside because we live in a desert, so it never really gets wet. We get 6 inches rain a year. Our facility is in a large potato storage warehouse that we bought. If our bales get wet, we set them up on top of the culverts and turn on the fan for 10-12 hours, and they're down to 4% moisture, which I don't even know if you get that low here. We try to bale it at 15 to 18, just like you do hay here. North of 18% moisture, I would not bale it because this stuff will get hot. Question back here, sir? Thought I saw another one. Nope, the flies. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the characteristics of the varieties that run best through here in terms of decortication? You talked a little bit about long fibers, and
sure.
One of the things I'm noticing is there's kind of two different camps in the fiber varieties. You got some that have no branching and some that have lots of branching. Have you noticed like what are some of the best characteristics you're looking for in fiber to run through this?
The seed salesman wants to know what varieties we do, right?
No, don't talk about particular varieties. No, I just want to talk about characteristics.
So characteristics, these are observations that we made over the years running fiber. We've probably touched more of it than anybody. We run Chinese stuff, Colorado stuff, feral crops. Growth nodes are a problem. The herd likes to stick where there's a growth node, where there's branching. So we drill everything on 6-inch centers. We put in about 450 to 550,000 seeds per acre. That gives us between a 1/4 inch diameter stalk and 3/8 of an inch, which gives us thick enough herd that the builders are happy, but not enough growth nodes that we have lots of issues with the fiber. So that tight spacing can help reduce the branching because it forces the buds to go up, trying to get to the sun, right? They're competing with themselves. Genetics-wise, we've run Futura. All the Futuras run really good. Carmagnola runs good. I'm not 100% sure what this is. Our bales are 60 inches. This one's 68. So I'm not sure where this one came from, but I think it's a French variety that was grown in Nebraska 2 years ago by one of our other partners. He's got a couple sections of ground in Alliance, Nebraska, and I think that's one of his bales. But I'm not exactly sure what it is. What other genetics would we run? We've run Yuma. We've run the Chinese Yuma. There was a Yuma crossbow that was bred in eastern Colorado, and the guy also made one called A1 and A2, and man, I wish he would have not stopped. A1 and A2, A1 was a little hot, A2, both of those made the best fiber herd and grain that we've run. And when CBD crashed in 2019, he quit. And we got about a pound of that seed left. And I don't know how to grow it out in the greenhouse, nor do I have time, but
we can
makes,
help you with that.
Oh yeah, but it made, we've taken that fiber to North Carolina to their textile school, and they have spun it and didn't even realize it was a dual purpose grain crop, right? Common knowledge says, oh, it has to be grown like fiber to be used in textiles. Well, that's all we had, and we sent it to him, and he says, yeah, this stuff's really great. And then we brought another little batch with it. He said, well, this wasn't red because the color's different. We live in the desert, we don't get gray. And he had no idea he was running that stuff the whole time. So I think propagation technique and genetics are important. Processing technique is almost more important in my mind of separating the fiber. Again, it depends on what you want to do with the stuff. If you're making cellulose insulation for hemperature, you could probably get away with something different and a different technique than what we have here. But again, we're trying to do long fibers. I came out of the plastics industry, made non-woven and Rochelle net products, and converted it into fresh produce packaging, potato bags, onion bags. Any bag you buy in the grocery store that's got non-woven mesh on it, we innovated that, and the mesh that it's made on. So we're trying to do things like that consume miles of material, not yards of material. Just a little different position in the marketplace, because we see those as better value-added products that will let us take care of the farmers better. You know, if you look at the diesel price and gas price in the last few days, it jumped up. Well, when that happens, fertilizer will go up. We paid $430 a ton for fertilizer this year, more last year. Well, what's that mean is we're paying we'll probably have to jump to $400 a ton to pay the farmers next year to grow it, if we contract it. Or when we do it ourselves, we still have to pay for land and fertility, and we have to pay for water. So that cost has to roll down to the farm. And without farmers participating in this and making a dollar at it, it's really hard to keep things going. So that's really important to take care of our farm.
So I'm going to cut off questions for now. We have plenty of time over lunch to continue asking questions of Corbett, but we want to get the machine started.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.